This last presentation in our symposium was created jointly by Master Gardener volunteers Carol Blake and me. Carol did almost all of the photography and setting up, and I did a bunch of tweaking. Please note that, unless they were credited otherwise, the photographs you'll see are Carol's. If you've ever tried to photograph butterflies or bees, you'll realize as you watch these slides that she has the patience and fortitude of a great private investigator, that or a first-rate stalker. As you can probably tell from its title, this presentation will not include data and statistics on the demise of native habitat. If you love native plants, you know all about that. This presentation is more for those of us who like to drool over catalogs from native nurseries. We're just showing you some of our favorite pollinator plants, many with which we're sure you're already familiar, in hopes that some will be new or unfamiliar so that you can consider including them among those you already have. The majority of native wildflowers fare best in sunny spots. They were happy in the prairie and might be happy in your sunny border. Then again, they might not do so well in soil more nutritious than they're used to, or they might do entirely too well. Through trial and error, you'll figure out which plants may stay and which will be composted or sent to live with someone else. Let's look at some sunny candidates. Golden Alexanders are one of those natives every garden should have. They're fairly easy to grow and, although short-lived, will self-seed and persist in many different soil or sun situations. Zizia is an important plant to a number of short-tongued insects that are able to reach easily the nectar in the small yellow flowers. They have a long bloom time, giving the garden or prairie some well-deserved early color for several weeks in late spring to early summer, when most other plants have not yet flowered. Also called golden zizia, golden alexanders will tolerate a lot of shade, but do best in full sun or light shade. Flowers develop from the outside edge of the umbel toward the center. If you're hoping to help grow the bumblebee population, these are a must. Zizia is also a larval host plant for the black swallowtail caterpillar. Wild geranium is native to much of eastern North America, and it never disappoints. It has lovely dissected leaves, beautiful pinkish purple flowers, and it readily spreads, forming stunning patches that everything from bees to butterflies can't resist. Though it's mostly found in woodlands in the wild, it does just as well in full sun. Geranium maculatum has a unique way of spreading its seeds. Each seed is packed into a pod, and the pods are attached to a structure that resembles a crane's bill. As the bill dries, it literally catapults the seeds away from the parent plant, some of them more than 30 feet. Then, each seed has a small tail-like structure attached to it that bends and moves in response to changes in humidity, which helps to drive the seed into the soil where it can safely germinate. This technique helps the clever little bugger ensure its spread into new areas. Wild lupine is a host plant of the Karner blue butterfly, a federally endangered species native to our Great Lakes region. After wild lupine sprouts from rhizomes in mid-April, the first brood of the Karner blue butterfly, which were born the previous summer, hatch and feed on the new leaves. During peak bloom time, these larvae pupate, and you can see adults flying from late May through early June. Like the wild geranium, Lupinus perennis has seeds that explode when it disperses, but it does so quite loudly. If you were standing in a field of them at the right time, you'd be tempted to duck and run for cover. By the way, you've probably noticed that the slides in this presentation include many friendly little pollinators that adore the plants being featured. Thanks again to Carol. Penstemon, also known as beard tongue, is a prolific producer of nectar and may bloom for a month or longer. Visited by a large diversity of honeybees, bumblebees, leaf-cutting miner and mason bees, It also attracts butterflies and sphinx moths that seek nectar from the flowers. Hummingbirds are attracted to the small insects nectaring on the plants, as well as to the nectar itself. The Baltimore checker spot, which uses beard tongue as one of its larval host plants, is in decline because of the habitat loss. If you're looking for a striking, unusual addition to your garden or a splash of color during the spring to summer transition, consider the blue-eyed grasses. What they lack in size, they make up for in beauty and tenacity. Do you have a well-drained site in your yard that receives lots of suns? These are the plants for you. Despite their common name, they aren't grasses at all, but rather members of the iris family. They handle competition quite well and readily spread via underground rhizomes. A large patch of these little plants is truly a sight to behold, especially if you are a bee. Pollinators readily take to the flowers, which is nice considering that most Cisaquintium species bloom and provide pollen and nectar to our winged friends before some of the larger summer flowers really get going. The petals even provide yellow markings that are like runway signs pointing to yummy treats for pollinators. Spiderwort can be found growing on the south side of road ditches and in medium to dry prairies and meadows. It's also a very attractive addition to any garden and quite easy to grow from seed. But it can be aggressive in a small setting since it's a profuse self-sower. In fact, one of my young friends who typically loves any plants I might throw her way has asked me not to give her any more of those spider thingies. They're all over the place. If you do have a spot to let it run rampant, you'll be inviting bumblebees, sweat and mason bees, syrphid, and narcissus bulb flies. Coreopses are a carefree family, waving brightly in late spring and early summer on sunny, even hot sites with dry, sandy, or poor soil. Beekeepers consider all the species to be good honey sources. In the past, some American tribes applied boiled coreopsis seeds to painful areas of their bodies in order to relieve ailments such as rheumatism. Lanceleaf coreopsis is probably the longest lived in the family and virtually foolproof. Just give it lots of sun and well-drained soil, and it will bloom its heart out all summer long. Threadleaf or world coreopsis is a popular 2 to 3 foot perennial with delicate dark green leaves divided into thread-like segments. A southern native, it's become common in the Midwest, but might not survive an unusually cold winter. Spreading by rhizomes or seed, it may be controlled by division every 3 or 4 years. As its name implies, tall coreopsis stands quite tall, reaching heights of 7 foot and in some cases up to 9. Native throughout Ohio, this coreopsis blooms late summer and into fall, unlike the spring-summer blooms of lanceleaf, threadleaf, or other tick seeds like grandiflora or tinctoria, golden tick seed, which is also called plains coreopsis. It has small but many yellow flowers with red centers in summer on plants 1 foot or so high. Why do they all bear the common name of tick seed? Quite simply, lots of people think their seeds look like ticks. Members of the genus Asclepias produce some of the most intricate flowers in the plant kingdom, comparable to orchids in their complexity. They're an important nectar source for native bees, wasps, and other nectar-seeking insects. Though interestingly enough, non-native honeybees commonly get trapped in the stigmatic slits and die. Milkweed plants typically produce a lot of nectar. Happily for nocturnal moths, it is replenished overnight, and the remaining nectar is ready for the first visitors in the morning. Prairie milkweed, an Ohio native milkweed, likes a sunny spot in medium soil. Over time, it will develop a very deep taproot, which helps to protect the plant during times of drought. Butterfly milkweed has a bold orange bloom on a shorter plant than the other milkweeds. It likes a dry to medium soil, sited in full sun, but is most happy in a sandy soil. The plant has a clear sap rather than the milky sap of the other milkweeds. Among its visitors are many species of long-tongued, short-tongued, and leafcutter bees, beneficial flies, beetles, and wasps. At least a dozen species of butterflies nectar from the butterfly weed, including monarchs, fritillaries, sulfurs, and pearl crescents. The bright orange color of butterfly milkweed may vary from yellow to deep red orange. Those of you color coding your garden will put this in the warm section between the reds and yellows. Poke milkweed is a native to Ohio and areas of the Midwest and eastern U.S. A medium tall milkweed found in sun to partial shade. It shows up frequently along woodland edges. In the garden, it can be used in the back of the border. World milkweed is also native to parts of Ohio, including Ashtabula County, as well as the Midwestern states. Short green milkweed is an uncommon native in Ohio, but common to the Midwest, which brings up the question, should you plant natives in your northeastern Ohio garden if a plant is not common to your particular area? If you're a purist, no. If the plant is happy and you like native bees and butterflies, why not? Wild petunia is a low grower that blooms May to September, and as an annual, reseeds politely and serves many uses to pollinators. Short-tongued bees and beneficial syrphid flies are attracted to the pollen. Long-tongued bees and leaf-cutting bees use its flower petals to construct their brood nests. Best of all, wild petunia is a host plant to the common buckeye butterfly caterpillars. The larvae gain protection by absorbing toxins from the plant leaves, which makes them unappealing to predators. Gardeners who like a little excitement will appreciate that when Ruellius humulus seeds have matured, they explode from the plant and may fly up to 10 feet away. Coneflowers. Loved by so many gardeners, adored by so many pollinators, especially native bees. Bumblebees, leafcutter bees, banded longhorn beetles, cuckoo bees, and sweat bees, to name a few. This showy open blooms of purple coneflower are a classic summer favorite for butterflies as well, especially fritillaries, monarchs, painted ladies, swallowtails, and skippers. It's a long-lived perennial that prefers full sun with medium to dry soil. There are some varieties of coneflowers that have lost their attractiveness to pollinators because some of the qualities that attract the bees in the first place have been lost either through cultivation or because the nectar has become too difficult to access due to flower distortion. So before you buy that strawberry and cream fizzy frazzle, consider the pristine, simple beauty of Echinacea purpurea. Wild bergamot is a showy, fragrant herb and an excellent source of nectar to many pollinators. The red, blue, or purple flowers of Monarda bloom from July through September. They don't like a dry soil and might enjoy some light shade, at least in the afternoon. The plants are resistant to deer because of the strongly scented foliage. Now, I know I just said that you need to be cautious with cultivars. However, one cultivar of Monarda vistuliosa has proven to be a super magnet with its sturdy upright habit and prolific flower display. Claire Grace has an impressive level of flower coverage that lasts for 3 straight weeks near 100%. But then Claire wasn't born in a laboratory or greenhouse. She is a naturally occurring selection of the species discovered by Barb and Michael Bridges in Tylertown, Mississippi, and named for their daughter. Native American tribes use the bulbs of nodding onion as a treatment for croup, colic, colds, and fevers. I never thought I'd want onions growing amongst wildflowers in my meadow, but nodding onions are a must-have. The interesting blossoms attract bees, beetles, flies, and wasps, not the attack kind, but rather pollinators like the typical weevil wasp you see here. Wasps are very important as pollinators. They may not be quite as efficient as bees because they're not covered with those fuzzy hairs that bees typically sport, but they're just as busy as the busiest bee out there. Gaillardia aristata may not be native to Ohio, but it's found all over the Great Plains states and in our neighboring states of New York and Michigan. Carefree and very hardy, it blooms from late spring into the autumn, so you might want to include it in your garden or meadow for that reason alone. Its bright orange and yellow blossoms are proof of the importance color plays in attracting pollinators. Indian blanket blooms have no scent, yet butterflies and bees still flock to them. Anise hyssop, also known as blue giant hyssop or lavender hyssop, is another must have. It is somewhat drought resistant and blooms nonstop from June through autumn. A member of the mint family, its leaves have a fragrant anise scent, and it attracts many butterflies, including painted ladies and common wood nymphs, skippers, and moths. Hummingbirds love it, as well as many nectar and pollen seeking bees and beneficial flies. Its seeds are an important source of protein for many birds, including American goldfinches, house finches, and sparrows. Looking for something tall, stately, and elegant? Culver's root can provide the height you need in the background of your garden or serve as a focal point in your meadow. An Ashtabula County native, it's another pollinator magnet. This plant really has no other synonyms, going only by the name Culver's root, derived from Dr. Culver of the early 18th century, who found laxative properties in the plant. But maybe that's too much information. Never mind. The name catchfly comes from the fact that insects are often stuck all over the stems of Silene regia, and a close look reveals why. Sticky glands cover the plant, and small insects alighting upon it often become fatally trapped. Why then would it be included among pollinator picks? Only a few birds and insects are able to see the color red, so this plant requires an elite group of pollinators who can respond to that wavelength, like ruby-throated hummingbirds and larger butterflies such as the tiger swallowtail. And we can see red, so a large clump of royal catchfly is quite a treat for our eyes. This fellow is thought to help treat rattlesnake bites by American Indians. The Ashtabula County Master Gardener volunteers do not recommend growing it for that purpose. We grow it because we think it's really cool. That, and it's one of the host plants of the black swallowtail butterfly, and it attracts a plethora of small native bees, beetles, and moths, and it does not attract rattlesnakes, so no worries there. Although large and dominant plants, cup plants may be controlled somewhat by cutting the stems back in early summer. It'll come back, but not nearly so tall, with blooms a bit later in the season. This technique may also be used on other large natives to help control their size. Why is it commonly called cup plant? The leaves clasp around the stem, looking as though the stem has pierced through them. They then form a shallow cup which holds water. Small insects, amphibians, and birds can then enjoy these itty-bitty vessels, and they do. Blazing star, also sometimes called gay feathers, is an iconic prairie nectar source for many bees and butterflies. Liatris pycnostachya that you see here is a great cut flower and holds its color well in dried flower arrangements. Several species of bumblebees are the primary pollinators of Liatris, but gay feathers are also irresistible to monarchs, swallowtails, skippers, sulfurs, hummingbird moths, and hummingbirds. The plants begin blooming in our area about the time the monarch returns from Mexico. Goldfinches and other seed-eating birds often visit the plants for seed. Because there are so many cultivars and varieties of Liatris, it's possible to find a plant that'll grow in almost any situation. We would all like a native that attracts a vast number of pollinators, one with lovely scented foliage throughout the growing season and a blooming period of, 3 months or so. Then we all should be planting monarch mint, mountain mint. There are 3 natural cultivars available, all native to Ohio, and all fabulous pollinators. However, since they attract just about any insect with wings, You may want to plant these farther away from a wooden house because carpenter bees are also big fans. Not the loveliest among our pollinator picks, nevertheless, hoary vervain is a great pollinator. Just make sure that helpful husbands don't pull it. They might easily mistake it for a weed. Longhorned, leafcutter, green sweat, cuckoo, bumblebees, they all adore this plain Jane of the meadow. My colleague Carol describes it as a really cool and hard to spot pollinator. Her camera caught this little stylogaster, a member of the thick-headed flies, zooming in on a hoary vervain. He may have a thick head, but you gotta love those legs. This little guy is only 3/4 of an inch long. Oh, you should also know that hoary vervain is sometimes called claybuster. Where I live, that alone makes it a must-have. Ah, the rudbeckias. Herta, the one you see here, is the one most commonly referred to as black-eyed Susan, and it offers many long-lasting flowers from June through October. The flower discs bloom from the bottom up, so bees collect the pollen by circling around the cones upward. Rudbeckia will grow in most soils and in full sun depending on the variety. Happy as a clam in poor soils, black-eyed Susan often fails in sites that are too rich. Although there are countless varieties and cultivars offered on the market, true natives are the most attractive to insects. And for your edification and design plans, here are some other true native Rudbeckias to consider. Brown-eyed Susan, native to Ashtabula and all of Ohio, with more profuse bloom of smaller flowers than Herta. Sweet black-eyed Susan, native to the Midwestern states and 1 to 2 feet taller than its cousins. And cut-leaf coneflower, native to Ashtabula and all of Ohio. This fellow is also called tall coneflower because it can reach to 9 feet. Helianthus provides a bountiful table for everyone with its nectar and pollen and seeds. Bees, digger, leaf-cutting, cuckoo, short-tongued, honey, bumblebees, and others. Almost every conceivable family of wasps, from the most minute of parasitic Chalcidoidea to large spider wasps and mud daubers. Butterflies and skippers, don't get me started. And after the flowers come the nutritious seeds loved by cardinals, chickadees, goldfinches, sparrows, and many other birds. If they can outrun the hawks, even chipmunks and squirrels adore sunflower seeds. The larvae of the painted lady butterfly constructs protective shelters of loose webbing within the host plant. And there are many different varieties of sunflowers in their cultivars, so finding one to fit into your garden conditions should not be a problem. Besides Maximiliana, known for producing a heavy crop of seeds, other native sunflowers include the sawtooth sunflower, native to Ashtabula County in Ohio. Grosseratus refers to the large saw teeth of the leaves, not the petals or the flowers, not the petals of the flowers. Tall sunflower, native to Ohio, the tallest giganteus grows is 6 feet, actually less than Maximilian's tallest of 10. Common sunflower, Aeneas, is native but hard to find when cultivars, most of which are variants of it, far outsell it. The woodland sunflower, native to Ashtabula County in Ohio, will grow in open woodlands in partial sun or partial shade. And the downy sunflower is native but uncommon in Ohio. So buy Mollus if you can find it. And here are 2 more pollinators that Carol caught on camera. One a bee and one that just looks like a bee. Unless it's pruned early in the summer, ironweed is another one of those biggies best saved for the back of the border, but do grow it, regardless of where you decide to place it for the number of pollinators too numerous to mention by name. A host plant for the American painted lady butterfly, ironweed blooms later in the summer into early fall, and so is much appreciated by migrating butterflies and native bees building up fat reserves for their winter snooze. They can pick it out easily in their cross-country flights. It's that tall royal purple flower standing high above all the other plants in the meadow. This is Eutrochium, formerly known as Eupatorium. The hollow stems may be used to construct bee houses for native bees. The tiny florets on the large flower heads produce abundant nectar for pollinators. It's a plant happiest in moist locations, especially spotted Joe, who grows along stream banks. Sweet Joe can take a bit more shade than his brothers, and Tall Joe is, well, the tallest of the Joes, reaching as high as 2 feet above his 6 foot brothers. Although not one of the best pollinator plants, gentian is certainly one of the most attractive for the native garden. The roots of gentians are said to be an antidote for certain snake bites, but once again, we'd prefer you not rely on hearsay, but rather seek immediate medical attention if a snake bites you. Notice that bumblebee entering bloom in the upper corner? Bottle gentian blooms never really fully open, and bumblebees are the only insects strong enough to pry apart those petals, so they can squirm their way to the reward. Other cultivars, also bumblebee favorites, are available, including downy gentian, native to Midwestern states but rarely found in Ohio, fringed gentian, native to Ashtabula County in Ohio but rare. It prefers full sun and a wetter site, and stiff gentian, also native to Ohio. Yes, indeed, it requires the determination and brute strength of our native bumblebees to conquer this particular flower's fortress. Give him a second. Here he goes. And he's gone. We don't know what he's doing down there, but he's going to do the job. And then he's going to get out of there the same way he got in there, only in reverse. Let's hear it for the bumblebee. There are many different varieties of goldenrod, native and cultivars, and all of them are very important late season nectar sources for many pollinators. Goldenrod supports 430 types of insects, either as a food source or as part of their life cycle. They provide nectar for many late season long-tongued and short-tongued bees, wasps, lace bugs, leaf hoppers, beetles, beneficial flies, butterflies, and moths. Many small insects and spiders hide in the foliage to escape predators. It is host to the goldenrod flower moth, green owlet moth, geometer moths, and other moths, as well as gulfly larvae and tree hoppers. You like birds? Juncos, goldfinches, sparrows, and other seed-eating birds depend on goldenrod seed during the winter months. Gulfly larvae, which form in the goldenrod stems, attract woodpeckers, chickadees, and other birds. The Solidago family is a big one with many cousins, among them Ohio goldenrod, showy goldenrod, stiff goldenrod, blue stem goldenrod. Then, of course, there are some others like Oldfield and early goldenrod, is all native to Ohio and Ashtabula County. Unfortunately, the ones we're most familiar with are Canadensis or Canadian goldenrod, but pollinators like them too, so they're okay. You might find it strangely satisfying in a quid pro quo kind of way, but Canadian goldenrod has become an invasive species in China, where it was introduced in 1930. Thanks for the brown marmorated stink bugs, China. We think you got the better deal with the goldenrods. The many floral discs of asters provide nectar and pollen to leafcutter, longhorned cuckoo, small carpenter, green sweat, and bumblebees, as well as bee flies, syrphid flies, and soldier beetles. Some of the last of the fall blooming plants, asters are an essential source of nectar to late season pollinators. There are many varieties of perennial asters with purple, blue, pink, and white flowers. Goldfinches, juncos, and other seed-eating birds simply adore asters. Both asters you see here are Ohio and Ashtabula County natives. Disciples of Doug Tallamy should know that he lists asters and goldenrods as native wildflowers that support the greatest number of moths and butterflies. Among the asters native to Ashtabula County in Ohio, and there are probably more, calico, heath, sky blue, heart-leaved, New York aster, smooth blue aster, frost aster, New England aster, Shorts aster, and whitewood aster. And why is that cucumber beetle up there? All asters attract the spotted cucumber beetle. But hey, where would you rather he be? Out there on the asters or eating your cucumber plants? That last aster was actually from a different genus because it's a woodland aster, which brings us to the next segment. You might be thinking right now that you don't have enough room for a shade garden. You don't even have any trees around your tiny property. Every human inhabited landscape has at least some shade, if only due to the structures around us. Even on a treeless lot, the north, east, and west sides of buildings also create shaded habitat. Deciduous or evergreen trees and woodland edges, they create shaded habitat. These environments are often overlooked in our developed landscapes, yet they provide a great opportunity to increase the diversity of woodland flora, and there is plenty of native flora that thrives in partial or full shade. Although it's not a great pollinator plant, wild ginger is a super native ground cover for shaded areas. It is probably pollinated by flies, beetles, and ants that are attracted to its brown flowers. Ginger grows from fleshy rhizomes that spread along a shallow root system rather slowly. It won't be taken over your yard like English ivy. And since deer don't find it palatable, you won't be looking out your window at night watching a small herd chowing down on ginger like they do your hostas. Violets are one of several species that offer pollinators nectar guides, little runway stripes on lower petals of the bloom to direct bees right to their food source. Blooming from April through June, this cheerful perennial will bloom all summer if kept watered. Violets are happy in light shade, but will trek out into full sun as well. There are pollen-collecting bees which specialize in violets, but many other solitary bees and beneficial bee flies often visit the blooms too. An important early nectar source for many butterflies and skippers, it is the only larval host for the great spangled fritillary, meadow, variegated, and regal fritillaries in our area. The butterfly caterpillars feed on the leaves at night and hide within the plant for protection during the day. One of the best features of Jacob's ladder is its foliage. Almost fern-like in appearance, the plant forms a clump of densely packed leaf stems, each bearing tiny leaflets. They rise along the stem like the ladder of the biblical dream of Jacob. We like its foliage. Early pollinators like its floral food source. Beetles and flies eat the pollen, and butterflies and moths extract nectar. The West Virginia white that you see in the lower left is a threatened butterfly in Northeast Ohio. While Jacob's ladder provides nectar for its nourishment, that particular butterfly needs toothwort as a larval host, and the removal of as much garlic mustard as we can possibly accomplish. This is Phlox divaricata, also known as blue phlox, woodland phlox, or wild sweet William. Dame's rocket, a non-native of the mustard family, is often confused with native phlox. Although it blooms at similar times, Dame's rocket has 4 petals, while native phlox has 5 petals on the bloom. While Dame's rocket can be an important food source in early spring for emerging and hungry pollinators, woodland phlox is not only beautiful, it's a host plant for many butterflies, swallowtails, gray hair streaks, and western pygmy blues. This spring ephemeral emerges early in the spring, then goes dormant in early summer. Emerging foliage is deep purple, then turns green, and the flowers start out as a pastel pink bud, then open into vivid true blue blossoms. Bluebells increase in size each year and will form a beautiful colony over time with almost no care from the gardener. If you have black walnut trees in your yard, bluebells won't mind growing in their shade. They're jugloan tolerant. Foam flower is a great low growing plant for woodland gardens, front of border, and natural plantings in shaded areas or moist areas. Its handsome lobed foliage stays attractive all summer, then turns hues of red and bronze in the fall. Flourishing in shady sites with average or moist, well drained soil, this delicate looking beauty tolerates clay, loam, acid or alkaline pH, heat, and even some drought. Supposedly, the fruits of Podophyllum peltatum can be eaten when they are very ripe, and there are recipes on the internet for harvesting and eating them. But another name for those May apples is American mandrake. If you know what mandrake is, you'll understand why we aren't suggesting you try eating these. Podophyllum does, though, have a long history of use as a medicine, and that is not restricted to its use by Native Americans. It was included in the 1864 British Pharmacopoeia too, and was a common ingredient in many proprietary medicines, including Carter's little liver pills. Those of us born in the 40s and 50s will know what I'm talking about. Today, several of its components have tumor inhibiting properties. Adiposide is a first line treatment for small cell lung cancer and a treatment for refractory testicular tumors, while tenoposide, another derivative, is used in the management of patients with acute lymphoblastic leukemia. And this plant likes dry shade. Good plant. The beautiful red and yellow blooms of our native columbine are unique. Actually, the genus Aquiglia arrived in North America only recently, about 10,000 to 40,000 years ago, crossing into North America from Asia over the Bering Land Bridge. What we call native wild columbine are pollinated by bees, bumblebees, hummingbirds, and several of the long-tongued moths. There are many cultivars and hybrids of European columbine, most of which are blue, purple, and or white. These hybrids will not grow true to type and have become naturalized in parts of the Midwest. It does seem that pollinators like all of them, though hummingbirds, being creatures of habit rather, gravitate to the red ones. A very nice choice for home landscaping in shaded settings. Mayanthemum racemosium will spread by rhizomes, but not aggressively. You could even use it as a taller ground cover. Commonly called false Solomon's seal, it is equally known as Solomon's plume or false spikenard. It is most often found in moist, rich woodlands and woodland edges, but can tolerate full sun and will grow larger blooms with more light. Most sedges prefer moist to wet soils, but not this one. Pennsylvania sedge spreads by rhizomes and may self-seed in optimum growing conditions. This is a low sedge with soft, delicate, arching, semi-evergreen leaves. It's a good ground cover for dry shade and for underplanting shade perennials. You can even use it as a lawn substitute for dry soils in shady areas since it forms a turf that never needs mowing, or at the most, 2 to 3 times per year. This sedge is primarily pollinated by wind, although short-tongued bees do visit. Why is it in a presentation on pollinators? Well, it does have flowers, though they're not much to look at. More importantly, it can host 36 different species of caterpillars, chiefly those of skippers. Almost everyone has that one spot, maybe more, in their home landscape that is always just a little bit damp. Only in the most extreme droughts does it ever dry out. And just when it does, bam, you have either a downpour that very night or a week of daily showers. There are native pollinator plants that will allow you to embrace that spot and thank your lucky stars for its special sogginess. Also known as cowslip, cowslock, or kingcup, marsh marigold is a lovely harbinger of spring. But don't confuse this native for the non-native and very invasive lesser celandine. In Cleveland, Ohio, lesser celandine was planted in flower beds of just two residences in the 1970s. A species of ranunculus, it escaped the confines of those 2 yards, and less than 40 years later, it had overtaken nearly 300 acres of parkland along the Rocky River, leaving little room for native species. A good way to tell these two apart is the flower petals. Marsh marigold has 5 to 9 petals, while lesser celandine has 8 or more. While marsh marigold is a member of the ranunculus family, it is not invasive, and its flowers produce both nectar and copious amounts of pollen, which attract many insect visitors. They may be most commonly pollinated by hoverflies. Nectar seeking bumblebees are the most important pollinators of blue flag iris, but short tongued and longhorn bees, butterflies, skippers, and other beneficials are also attracted to the showy flowers. Dark lines on the sepals leads insects to the nectar like an airport runway. Iris versicolor also goes by the common names of harlequin blue flag, northern iris, and wild iris. Scarlet bee balm, crimson bee balm, scarlet monarda, Oswego tea, or bergamot. We know it by many names, but first and foremost in the monarda family, this is the one that stands out in the garden and shouts, "Hey, all ye hummingbirds in the county, come hither and see what I've got for you." And this is the monarda that likes it a little damp. Although it may be vulnerable to powdery mildew, if it's grown in full sun and most moist soil, it's growing and its growing clump is pruned to permit air circulation. This showstopper will be just fine. Did I mention that it's juglone tolerant? Indeed it is. We could call it rose milkweed, another common name, but swamp milkweed sort of drives home that this Asclepias likes medium to wet soils, although when established, it can tolerate drier situations. It does best in full sun, where the large magenta red flower clusters attract many species of bees, beneficial flies, and wasps. Swamp milkweed attracts more than 20 butterfly species. Rather than name them all, just trust me that these are the ones you want in your garden. Another scarlet beauty, cardinal flower, is named for its cardinal red flowers, which are an important nectar source for hummingbirds and swallowtail butterflies. The flowering spikes open from the bottom to the top and bloom for several weeks. Parent plants will not persist for more than a few years, but it is a prolific self-seeder and fast grower. Allowing the seeds to make good seed to soil contact will give the opportunity for the plant colony to continually replenish itself with new offspring. Its blossoms also make excellent cut flowers. One more thing. All lobelias produce a secondary compound known as lobeline, which deters herbivores. That means you can plant these all around natives that Bambi might otherwise mistake for dessert and possibly offer the tastier plants at least some protection. Another lobelia, and don't forget what I just said about all lobelias, attractive to digger, sweat, small carpenter, and bumblebees, which are most likely the most common pollinator. Lobelias, blue lobelias offer a great contrast to the yellow flowers that typically bloom about the same time in late summer and fall. Can you imagine these with goldenrods? How about now? Both Chelone glabra and Leonii are important host plants providing larval food for the lovely orange and brown Baltimore checker spot butterfly. Their nectar also attracts other butterflies and bumblebees, as well as ruby-throated hummingbirds. Turtlehead likes wet to moist soils and full to parched sun, and can grow to 5 feet tall. If grown in the shade, where they might need support reaching for the sun, it's best to pinch back the stem ends in the spring. Pink turtlehead is an escapee from cultivation. The flowers of all shallones resemble the head of a turtle, a fun feature for children. And because its blossoms are always closed, like those of gentians, their bumbling, fumbling bumblebees provide endless entertainment as well. The large and numerous daisy-like yellow flowers of Helenium autumnale can provide welcome color in late summer and autumn when many other blossoms have disappeared. Despite its common name, it presents no problems for most allergy sufferers. Its pollen is distributed by insects, not wind. Sneezeweed is one of the host plants of the dainty sulfur. Among the bees that love them, long-tongued, longhorn, leaf-cutting, cuckoo, bumble, and honeybees. Also wasps and syrphid flies. Don't let sneezeweed dry out or it will become straggly. False dragonhead thrives in wetter soils. Flower stems will remain in whichever direction they are placed, thus another common name, obedient plant, making it a fun plant for children. The name obedient applies only to its flowers and has nothing to do with its behavior in the garden. It is a rhizomatous plant, so its root system will spread fairly quickly underground, making it a wonderful species if you need a plant to fill in large spots around your yard. Like all members of the mint family, it produces copious amounts of nectar. Blooming late summer and well into fall, obedient plant provides a much needed boost of energy for pollinators facing the coming winter. Well, that just about takes care of all our favorite picks among pollinator plants. At the risk of preaching to the choir, though, we'd like to add just a few quick tips about planting and working in your native garden. Some of our earliest pollinators are out in March, even February, while the latest don't hunker in or leave until November. Plant for everyone from early spring through autumn. When you're looking down from 300 feet, it's hard to spot one purple coneflower, but a grouping of 1 or 2 dozen, those are easy to spot. Yellow jackets are one thing, but ground nesting or miner bees are solitary bees that create underground galleries with queens living individually and raising their own young. The entrances to the nests are small piles or patches of bare soil. Ground bee queens do not defend their nesting areas and are very docile and unlikely to sting. The males who often patrol an area can be very active and seem aggressive, but they don't even have stingers. Like other bees, they are active foragers of nectar and pollen from flowers, making them beneficial pollinators. Don't forget the night shift. Moths and bats that feed on nectar at night will appreciate evening primroses, 4 o'clocks, and any other plant that blooms in the evening. Be careful of hybrids. Some may be as beneficial as the cultivars that gave birth to them, but quite often their fragrance and other attributes are sacrificed for the sake of larger blooms. Many species of insects and birds eat pollen. You're not helping them by growing pollenless sunflowers. Don't spray. Insecticides kill all insects. And more studies on herbicides are showing that they have a detrimental effect on insects, birds, and mammals. That includes Homo sapiens. Even if you have a very small yard, try to grow the largest little patch possible of pollinator habitat. Doug Tallamy tells us that if we only build these small native islands, they will serve as connectors to other native habitats and eventually provide a stable, sustainable ecosystem for the pollinators we are trying to save. Do this, and you'll not only have your native island, you'll have less grass to mow. By they, we mean all the insects that need your natives as a food source, and all the birds that need those seeds and those insects. In closing, we'd love to invite you to the Outdoor Learning Center's native garden behind Conneau's Middle School on Gateway Avenue. It's just a quick hop off Route 90, north of the Route 7 exit. While it's open at no cost to the public, the faculty and staff just ask that you refrain from visiting when students are in class because folks wandering around the garden have proven to be major distractions from study. This spring, volunteers will be widening paths in preparation for making the popular site more wheelchair friendly, but the pollinators' favorites will all be there. Depending on the season, you'll find many of the natives pictured in this presentation, so please come and sit for a while and enjoy the action around you.
All righty. Thank you so much, NC. And thank you both. Thank you, NC and Carol, for such a great presentation. You had more pollinators than Carter has liver pills.
Oh, you're too young to know that phrase.
I wasn't ever sure exactly what that meant, but I heard it a lot from my father and grandfather. But I did get the reference, so maybe that makes you feel better. So we have a few minutes to go over a few questions, and we have Carol here and we have NC here, willing to help answer questions. So if you do have any, go ahead, put them in the Q&A bots, put them in the chat bots. We appreciate the support. There's a ton of people, NC and Carol, look in the chat box, just the people saying how great the presentation was. So we really appreciate that. It's great to see. So thank you, everybody that is thanking NC for the great presentation, Carol for the presentation. So go ahead, put in your questions in the Q&A bots. If you put it in the chat bots, I'll try and find it, but it's easier to look in the Q&A bots. So let's see, let's go through some questions. Janine asked, will the cold of the next 2 mornings have any effect on all of our emerging plants? I keep mine covered up with leaves. And, you know, I'll let NC and Carol speak to that if they want to, but Janine, I think that is a great plan to leave some of that natural cover up on some of those plants. That's one detriment to these early springs and these warm springs is we get plants budding out and emerging, and then we get a cold freeze, and it can cause some damage. Carol or NC, do you want to add anything to that?
I'm thinking everything's going to be fine unless you took a whole lot of your leaves and debris off. You know, it's still early and a lot of stuff is still has not emerged too much. So I think everything will be, at least the stuff up. I'm along the lake, as is the school garden, and we're just a little bit cooler than the rest of you, but I think everything should be all right. Not a guarantee.
Yeah, this time of year, it's best to avoid nasty, neat gardens, and keeping them covered up with leaves for a while is good, not only for the plants that might emerge a little too soon, but we've seen a lot of birds back early this year, and they just might be looking for all the critters living amongst those leaves. So it's good to leave the leaves a little while longer.
Let those leaves linger a little longer. Let's see. What else do we have? We have a question saying, you mentioned a few, but could you list which flowers can be cut back early in the summer so to reduce their height when they later flower? Is there any more that you want to add to that list?
I cut back my cup plant. I could cut back my ironweed and my Joe Pye. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. Depends on where it sits in my garden. But I found it very helpful to cut back the cup plant because they just get too large.
Nice.
Yeah, especially if you're growing some of these taller plants as specimens. Out on the prairie, they're used to other plants around them holding them up, which is why they stay so stately. But if they're specimen plants and they don't have anybody else holding them up, if you don't cut them back to shorten them a little bit, they're likely to go right over in the fall with a good wind.
I see in the chat box, Carrie said that was very helpful about the cup plant, that hers always get so high it falls over. So that's great that we were able to share some of that information. Kathy asked, I try to use only native flowers, not cultivars, for optimal benefit to insects. She says, I have pink turtle head. Is this beneficial and useful? So okay to keep?
You're going to have to repeat the end of that. I didn't catch it.
I believe she's asking, she has pink turtle head. She's just asking if we think that is okay for her to keep, even though it's not necessarily a cult, or it's not necessarily a native flower.
I have some and I like it. I keep it. I have all three varieties. If you like it, it's your garden.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, grow what you want, and the, I don't think, correct me if I'm wrong, Carol, but if you have a garden full of natives and then you have a few non-natives mixed in there, I don't think that causes any harm to the native plants, does it?
No, it's your garden.
Yeah, excellent. Someone asked for the building name or address for the Conneaut Garden again. I think NC's typing in an answer there.
Yeah, Reese put it in too.
Okay, awesome. The Outdoor Learning Center, it's at 230 Gateway Avenue in Conneaut, Ohio, 44030. Reese, we can make you a panelist if you want to hop on and answer any questions. I know they mentioned that earlier. Just let me know in the chat.
The easiest way to find it is under the large wind turbine right off Route 7 and Gateway Avenue. You can see the turbine from
the large broken wind turbine.
Exactly.
But it's a nice landmark.
Yeah, it's easy to see.
Let's see. I am promoting Reese to panelist, or trying to anyway. There we go. There's Reese. Awesome. Reese is another one of our Master Gardener volunteers. Let's see. Someone asked about the size of mountain mint.
About 3 foot.
Awesome.
About 3 foot tall, and it spreads nicely, but it's not as aggressive as a lot of the other mountain mints. And I feel that you absolutely need it if you have a pollinator garden, because it attracts so many different critters.
Awesome.
And it stays so nice throughout the season, so it kind of sets off other pollinator plants as well.
And you don't have to baby it.
The first time we saw the Mudicum variety of mountain mint, we were just blown away. It was out in Conneaut at a different butterfly garden in the metro parks, and it was early in the morning. There was dew on the plant, and bumblebees were sleeping on it. They were sleeping right on the plant, hundreds and hundreds of them, and we had no idea what was going on. Later on, we found out that later in the season, solitary male bumblebees don't live in a colony, so they get kicked out once they're born and they have to fend for themselves. So they just spend the night wherever they can. And in this case, it was mountain mint.
Awesome. There was a question someone asked, places to buy native plants, and that is a great question because we have that resource on our website. I'm putting it in the chat box for everybody. But if you go to our, go.osu.edu/NEOPS, again, that link will be emailed to you tomorrow. if you don't have it already. But down at the bottom of our 2021 page, there's resources, and we have assembled a plant sources handout. Reese maybe even want to talk about it a little bit more, but it has a ton of native plant sources where you can purchase native plants.
Well, there's maybe 5 or 6 on there that are in northeastern Ohio. And then there's a lot of mail order sources. Mail order is getting much better these days. The quality of packing thing is improved. So don't not buy mail order. And when you go to your nursery, if you can't find any of those straight species that you really want for pollinators, ask the owner why he doesn't carry those, and maybe in the future we'll start to see more of those in the local nurseries.
Yeah, and so in addition to those sources on our website, our website's really a one-stop shop for pollinator education. We have all the recorded presentations that you can check out, but then we also have these great resources that the planning committee put together, including plant sources, where to buy them. There's also online pollinator resources, so different websites you can check out. Pollinator symposium books that you may find interesting, books that are related to pollinators and pollinating topics. And then someone also asked in the chat or in the Q&A for suggestions on woody natives, trees, and shrubs since they flower early. There's trees for pollinators under the resources, and there's shrubs for pollinators under the resources, as well as perennials. So I highly encourage everybody to check out our website that we have put together. If you need the link, you can send me an email. But again, it's go.osu.edu/Northeast Ohio Pollinator Symposium, abbreviated NEOPS. So check that out. I put the link in the chat box as well. A ton of great resources. Again, thank you so much to the planning committee for putting such a great presentation program and resource together. But yeah, the suggestions for woody natives that may be a good suggestion for our next series, doing a presentation on that one. Also, Reese mentioned quite a few good woody natives in his presentation on invasives and what to replace them with. So if you didn't check that one out, check it out on our website. Let's see. Someone says blue-eyed grass seeds planted in February. How long before they come up? And
they like it a little bit warmer before they start emerging. In fact, you have to be careful because they look like weeds when they start coming up. You don't want to start cultivating or weeding around where you've planted them too soon.
Yeah, and we've seen even like in agricultural fields and different plantings, it's been such a dry March, at least here in Northeast Ohio. We're at 3 inches where we're usually at 6 inches for the year. It's been such a dry year that some of the crops, some of the things planted are waiting for a little bit more moisture before they start to germinate. And of course, the soil is still warming up here in Northeast Ohio. Sue said April is Ohio Native Plant Month, which is awesome. OhioNativePlantMonth.org. She plugs the website. The 501c3 is selling a beautiful yard sign. So check that out. We'll give a free plug to OhioNativePlantMonth.org. Check that out. Yeah, someone said places to buy native plants. We talked about that. Kathleen said, is there a top 10 native pollinator plant for small gardens? I don't know of one, but maybe that's something that we can make in the future, just a quick guide.
Andrew, can I share a screen?
Yeah, go ahead, Nancy.
How do I do that?
Down at the bottom, there should be that green button that says share screen.
Oh. Share screen.
While Nancy's doing that, Lori said she just printed the resources list that we gave on where to buy plants. Very impressive. She says, thank you. Thank you, Lori. Glad you found that helpful. There we go.
Several of us applied for grants, and we're starting calling it a native nursery in Ed Malik Park. And Carol's going to be planting these, and so is Reese, I think. And the top 10 plants that we received through this grant were milkweed, blue wild indigo, purple coneflower, wild bergamot, foxglove, beard tongue, Virginia mountain mint, goldenrod, New England aster, ironweed, and golden alexanders. And I think it's because they're the top 10 that would grow in similar conditions that could put up with a little drought once they're established. None of these guys are really swamp lovers, but they're great plants for sunny borders.
And I did a quick Google for Ohio State on the top 10 native perennials, and I came up, there's a Zoom April 21st at 6:30 p.m. from Mahoning County, top 10 native perennials for pollinators, great plants and great networks. So I'm sure they'll cover that whole fact sheet there. But you can also go to the bottom where it says go.osu.edu/helpbees and check that out as well.
I don't know how you could possibly limit it to 10.
Yeah, you can't. Well, once you get addicted, that's just, truly impossible.
Yeah, the top 10 are just a gateway to all the other ones, right? All righty. Let's see, what else do we have? Kathy says, can seeds collected from flowers in the fall be scattered now and succeed in growing flowers? I think that depends on the flower, but Carol and Etsy, do you want to comment on that? Or Reese?
I think it depends on the flower, because some of them have to be stratified. Depends on how they were stored. NC or Reese would probably have a better idea of this.
Well, Carol's right. So most of the natives need a cold period, break dormancy. And that's why you see in the fall, they'll get that cold period needed over the winter. They'll break dormancy and sprout and grow on in the spring. There's exception, obviously. Mosses don't require any stratification, so you can plant them any time of the year. But in general, with native perennials, I would recommend planting in the fall.
Reese, which nursery is it that provides such wonderful information about which seeds need stratification, which needs scarification?
Well, there's two mail order places. There's Prairie Nursery and Prairie Moon Nursery. And I think they're on that list of places to get plants. But both of them have very good germination requirements. And then they have a table that tells you what that means. And that'll tell you, for example, if you're not planting directly outside, you're planting in your basement under lights or something like that, they'll tell you how long the stratification period is. It's usually 30, 60, 90 days. Thanks, Nancy.
Yeah, I think it's the Prairie Nursery that has great resources that you can bring up and download. But yeah, they're both great places and willing to help you if you have any questions.
If you're looking for an instant garden, both of those places will sell a mixed flat of plants, and you pick the plants and you get 7 varieties for, I'm not sure, cost is a little over $100 probably. But you can customize it, you can get the small plants, and you get a lot more instant gratification than planting from seed.
There was a question in the chat box that said they are fighting Japanese knotweed on about half an acre. And last year they got a good kill with triclopyr on the knotweed, and they are seeing a few small ones come up now. They're asking for suggestions on management for their 2-year battle against the knotweed. Should they hand pull a herbicide or try to plant things to outcompete? Well, I can weigh in on this. You probably won't be able to outcompete it with anything. That stuff is tough and aggressive. I would keep doing what you're doing. I wouldn't give up now. The thing about invasives is you got to fight it until it's completely gone. I mean, you know, when you start to only have a few plants left, don't lift your foot off the gas pedal, as they say. Keep doing what you're doing. Me personally, I would hit it again with the triclopyr and try to finish it off. That'll take it down to the root, kill the whole plant. But yeah, I mean, I would keep doing what you're doing. Reese, I don't know if you wanted to add anything to that.
Well, no, you're absolutely correct. The other thing, even if you get all the plant and all the piece parts, you've still got years of accumulation of seeds in the seed bed.
Yep.
And they're going to come up for a little while longer. So, you know, eradicate it until there's nothing left, and then start to replace that with natives.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
I mean, not
you
just
want to avoid herbicides when you can, but knotweed and Phragmites, I mean, there are just some plants that if you want natives to live, you've got to get rid of them, the bad guys first.
Yeah, I mean, we talked a little bit about it in our other presentation, which you can watch on our website. It's all recorded on invasives and what to replace them with. But yeah, with any invasive, I mean, they're invasive for a reason. They're hard to get rid of, so you can't let up on it. And even, you know, years after you've thought you had complete control, make sure you can keep going back and scouting for those invasives, because they can become a problem in a hurry.
Good advice, Andrew.
All righty, let's see. Someone asked, please differentiate between the native and non-native columbines. Perhaps they have had non-natives that reseed themselves at their location. Anyone want to comment on that?
I believe that the native columbine is the red and yellow one, and anything else is a cultivar in this area. I think out west there's some natives that are blues and different colors, but if you're talking about in this area, it's going to be the red.
Excellent. Someone's asking about suggestions for growing bee-friendly lawns. Who gave that presentation on bee-friendly lawns? Didn't we have someone give one of those? Maybe it was at Master Gardener meeting. Does anyone have any suggestions for them on a bee-friendly lawn?
Like clover.
Well, yeah, clover would be the obvious choice.
Dandelions.
I always say if there wasn't any white clover in Northeast Ohio, no one would have a lawn.
Yeah, I wouldn't mow the dandelions until they look like they're going to seed, because they may not be native, but the pollinators love dandelions.
And I think NC mentioned it before, but you know, the more native flower beds you plant, the less lawn you have to mow. So that's always a good suggestion. All right. Mary asked, I've read to take out 7 she read that it takes about 7 years to eliminate an invasive seed back like garlic mustard. Yeah, garlic mustard is one of those that is hard to get rid of, and it keeps coming back and coming back and coming back. But again, we cover a little bit about that in our invasive program that you can watch on our website that was recorded. I think that was the second week. But yeah, invasives, identification, eradication of native alternatives. But yeah, garlic mustard is one of those that is really a pain in the butt, and you got to stay on top of it. Can't forget about doing it 1 year, and it'll be back to where it was when you started.
I just put a link in the chat on the University of Minnesota bee lawn program. So everything you wanted to know about lawns for bees.
Excellent. All righty. Someone says, how do you prepare soil in a garden for new plants or seeds for a native garden? Carol, do you have any insight on that?
Can you repeat that?
How do you prepare the soil in your gardens for new plants or seeds? Is there any specific? I mean, it probably depends mostly on what you're planting and where it's at, but any suggestions for them on that?
Depends on how hard you want to work at it. I mean, sometimes you can just put down a layer of newspaper, kill the grass, or you can kill the grass with the other methods that are not always friendly. Put some topsoil in, you can dig it up just like any other garden. It's not rocket science. Reese?
Carol keeps telling me don't over fertilize, for one thing. Natives don't need a lot of fertilization. I like to add compost. Carol tells me don't over compost, but I think it adds to the tilth of the soil and to the overall health of the plants. But don't over fertilize, especially with synthetic fertilizers. They don't need them. You don't see them fertilized out in nature, so you don't need to do that in your garden.
That yeah, for the most part, that is definitely correct, Reese. I would warn people that you may have a spot in your yard that the pH is way off or the nutrients are way off for whatever reason. Sometimes topsoil is hauled into an area when building a house, or that all things can happen. So if you're having trouble growing stuff, it would be valuable to get a soil test. But yeah, for the most part, you don't have to make huge soil amendments for a lot of these native plants.
Yeah, so following along on that, ashtabula soil is slightly acidic. I don't know what the average is, 6.5, 6.6, somewhere around there probably. And all of the native perennials that you're trying to establish are ones that have over time grown up in Northeast Ohio, the Midwest in general. So you want to try to match the soil pH for the plants.
Yeah, and for whatever reason, if your soil pH is very, very low or very, very high, and it's not in that average or common range for Northeast Ohio, then you might have to make some amendments, adding lime or sulfur. But yeah, for the most part, you should be good to go.
Or you could do a little research and find plants that accept that acidity or whatever. Like blueberry. There's.
Yeah, if you want to grow hydrangeas or blueberries or some other plants, they like really acidic soil. All right.
Go back to the garlic mustard just for a second.
Yeah.
I really hate garlic mustard. What I found out is I learned that it was a biennial. Comes up 1 year, and it looks completely different the first year than it does the second year. So the second year it flowers, sets seed, develops a different shaped leaf. So you got to know that you got to be able to distinguish between the two. But what you do, cut the seeds off at a minimum and put those in your garbage. Don't compost pile. Worst of all, don't let them fall on the ground because they'll just germinate and continue the process.
And you know, if you really want to, you could eat it too. It's an edible, so you know,
There you go.
eat all your garlic mustard and stop it from spreading.
It really does a detriment to a lot of wildflowers. The wildflowers aren't strong enough to outcompete.
Andrew, there was a questioner that asked about how to get rid of celandine.
Mm-hmm.
And that's another one of those things you're probably going to need a chemical, unless you've got just one or two plants close together. You can try digging them all up, but it's got one of those root systems. If you leave a tiny little piece, it's back. So
Yeah.
glyphosate or something like that would be best.
I'll see if I can find a fact sheet on that for them. All righty. Well, as we wrap up here, I want to thank everybody again for joining us tonight. A few people have been dropping off. I know it's getting late, but we appreciate everybody, especially those that have made it to all 5 presentations. If you missed any of them, again, they're on our website. You'll be getting an email. When you leave this, you're going to be getting a survey. And if you enjoyed NC and Carol's presentation, let them know in the survey. Just tell them what you thought. There's a lot of great encouraging words in the chat box after the presentation. So we appreciate that. We appreciate the feedback. Let us know what you want to see in our next series, and we'll try to provide some information that you're looking for. But in the meantime, check out our website, Northeast Ohio Pollinators Symposium. So go.osu.edu/NEOPS. And if you are on Facebook, you can follow the Ashtabula County Extension Office or the Ashtabula County Master Gardeners Facebook page, the Ashtabula County Soil and Water, or the Ashtabula County Beekeepers Association, and we will keep you up to date with any information on pollinators that and any classes that we're offering. So thank you everybody for joining us. Thank you again, Carol and NC, especially for tonight's presentation. Thank you, Reese, for joining us and helping us answer some of those questions. And I think I've thanked everybody. Thank you to the planning committee one final time. Great success.
Thank you, Andrew.
Yeah. Making the best out of these interesting times, but it was certainly a success, and I'm certainly proud of everybody that put in a lot of hard work to put it all together. So thank you all. If I'm putting in the chat box the control for that weed, but if you have any questions, send them our way. You can email me or contact your local extension office or Master Gardener office, and we'd be happy to help you. So I believe that is it, unless anyone else has anything. Carol, NC, Reese?
No, thank you, Andrew.
Awesome.
Very good job, NC.